Hey everyone, it is February the 2nd, and I don't know about you, but I took a great deep sigh and breath out, breath in, cleansing breath when I finished January 31st and went right into February 2nd and a whole new group of people and a new focus. Not that we can't learn anything from Job. I never said that, but it wears you out, right? All of the speeches, it wears you out. So we're in a new chapter. We've met new people. We're meeting new people every day. And we are really seeing what God can do with a life that isn't perfect. And I love that about God, that He will choose to use imperfect people for His perfect plan. Maybe you want to write that down. God uses imperfect people for His perfect plan. And that's what we're going to see here in our lesson today as we take a look at Job. Oh, goodness. At Exodus chapter 4, verse 20 is our key verse. Now, I don't want to escape the whole little situation where God says He's going to kill Moses. But I don't want to take up the teaching time on that. I have put a link. I put a link under the something new there. And it says about God's thought to kill Moses. And take a look at that just for your extra study today. I didn't want to take up our teaching time for that. But so there is that piece of the story, because we're going to be looking at verse 20. And this comes right on the heels of that situation there with the knife and the circumcision and God saying, I'm going to kill you. So the verse here that we're looking at says, so Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and headed to the land of Egypt. In his hand, he carried the staff of God. Now, let's think for just a minute. Remember that Moses, now chosen to be the deliverer of God's people, after some convincing, right? He had this lengthy conversations with God about this situation. I don't know if any of you have ever had that, when God's calling you to something and you can think of every reason in the world why you're not qualified for that. And I'm raising my hand. But eventually we surrender, hopefully. So we had all of that in yesterday's reading. But we cannot dismiss that little phrase, in his hand he carried the staff of God. Because remember that even though now he is the appointed deliverer and mouthpiece between God and His people, he was once a shepherd. Yes, he was royalty, Egyptian royalty at one point, living in the palace life, having the palace life, educated, fed well. And we know the story. He murdered and he left to become a lowly shepherd. In fact, there's a lot of animosity between Egyptians and shepherds. That's, again, something maybe you want to look up. But he was considered lowly. Shepherds were not considered a sought-out vocation. Let's put it that way. But they carried with them a staff. And the staff was the purpose of a staff. You may or may not know. So I thought I would run through these. It's got a crook and it's got a straight part on it. And the crook is used for multiple purposes to pull that shepherd back in to the fold, to keep them from wandering off, to get them from, keep them in the group, and also to maybe even pull them away from harm. to grab them hook them around the neck, maybe even hook them around the feet. But in other words, just to guide them along the path. The shepherd used the staff as he held it with walking to keep his feet sure and steady. He also used the longer part, the straight part of the staff, to defend off predators that were there to kill the sheep that he was responsible for taking care of, to ward them off from harm, to ward harm off from them. So this was his tool, his what he depended on for his livelihood, for his security, for his safety. It was I don't want to call it a security blanket, because that's not what it was like, but it was his security and his strength and his source of power to do his job. So we see that he's carrying that with him. And I want us to just take a little field trip back to yesterday's reading in chapter 4, where Moses is having a conversation, continuing the conversation with God. In fact, the Bible says Moses protested again. I get it, Moses. I know what that's like. He said, if you won't believe me or listen to me, what if they say the Lord never appeared to you? The Lord asked him, what is in your hand? A shepherd's staff. Moses replied, throw it down. And the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out, grab its tail. So Moses reached out, grabbed it, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. All right. This is what I want us to see here. Several points. Is that God breaks the power of what we hold powerfully to through surrender. He's carrying his staff with him. But now his staff is powerful in a different way. Before, he dropped his staff and it turned into a snake, and then he picked it up and it turned into a staff again. It was powerful. In his own hand, he was able to do what needed to be done, and it was used for its purpose, what it was designed to. But as soon as he surrendered that, what he held on to, what he thought was powerful, God showed him what real power was all about. He carried his staff, and this time, the staff of God is what he calls it. The staff of God. So what I want you to do is make note of all the different things throughout the story, and it's a lengthy story of Moses. Make a note of what he does with the staff. Okay? Now, you may know the story already, Moses' story. Many of you may not know it. But I want you to pay special attention to what he does with the staff. It is no longer a shepherd's staff. It is the staff of God, with the power of God in it. So if we're willing to surrender that which we hold on to, that which we think is powerful, that which we think we can accomplish things with, if we're willing to surrender that to God, we will see what real power is. I don't know how that plays out and manifests itself in your life, but in my life, I've seen it manifested. When I surrender the things that I hold on to, my past, the things that I hold on to, my accomplishments, the things that I can do, the things that I can control, the things that I have influence over. Sometimes it's jobs, sometimes it's education, sometimes it's position. When we lay that down and say, God, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do it. And that's really what he did. Now, he still had some moments. If you remember chapter 4, he still had some conversation with God. Still pleaded, Moses still pleaded with the Lord. He pleaded again. He wasn't convinced easily. I would love to say that if God turned my source of power that I threw down into a snake and asked me to pick it up, or did something miraculous with it, and I went to pick it up and it turned back into that thing, I would hope that I would believe him. But I'm not going to say that I would. I'm not going to say that I would, because I'm human. So then we need to ask ourselves, am I willing to surrender whatever it is that I'm holding dear? Sometimes we hold on to negative things because that's just all we know. But what if we surrendered those negative things? What if we surrendered our past? Basically, that's what Moses was doing. He was saying, I am a shepherd, and this is what I use for my job, but I'm going to surrender every bit of it because you told me to lay this down. And by him saying, he took his wife and his sons and he put them on the donkey and he headed to the land of Egypt. He is telling God, I am moving forward with this plan that you have laid out. I'm still scared. I'm still pleading. Still don't get it, but I am doing that. This is a verse that's telling us that we can carry the power where we go. He empowers us to go where he's called us to go. That should excite us. The second thing I want us to see is God uses our past to advance the future of his kingdom. He uses our past to advance the future of his kingdom. Moses was a murderer, but that didn't matter to God. So whatever we're holding on to that we think is so bad, we can lay it down and it can become power. It can become powerful. I think of the people that I know that have had abortions and that have used that powerful part of their life and that painful part of their life, to become power in the work of God. And they work at crisis pregnancy centers. They maybe even take in pregnant teens who they can help through an adoption process. I know of a man who was an alcoholic, strung out on drugs, surrendered that to God, and now God has used him to create a nonprofit organization here in our area that's all about sobriety and surrendering to the Lord's work and the Lord's will and the Lord's word. God will use a painful past to direct the future for his kingdom. Am I willing to be used? God empowers what we lay down. Am I willing to experience the power? The power of God might scare us, honestly. I think it will. Sometimes I see it and I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. Like when John saw what he saw, he fell as dead on the island of Patmos. And you know what? I think it would scare us, honestly. It would scare us. What if we believed God would do powerful kingdom work with what we surrender to him? What would it be like if we actually believed that? Am I willing to surrender? Am I willing to be used? Because we can surrender and not be used. Those are two different things. A lesson for another day. And am I willing to experience the power of God? Carry the power where you go. Surrender it and pick it back up and move forward. Just like Moses did. See you next time on Read Through the Word.